All right, Gunnar, why don't we just start? If you could tell us a little bit about Monerium.
Yeah, glad to do so. I'm happy to be here. Monerium, we are a company that issues e-money on blockchain. And we were actually the first company to get a license to do so. So we got the permission from the Financial Supervisory Authority to do just that. Then it's just to issue e-money, which is just digital cash and has been known for decades. It's what you have on used to have on your prepaid debit cards, for example. So we were just using this new technology to do just that. And it's, of course, programmable and, has all the nice characteristics.
Great. So the topic here is Genius Act versus MiCA and how they may affect stablecoins. So I have a few questions here that I'm going to put forward. So the first is that the Genius Act is on balancing innovation and stability. And the Genius Act emphasizes fostering innovation in the US dollar dominance with a flexible federal state framework, while MiCA prioritizes a unified, stringent approach for consumer protection and market stability across the EU. So right out of the gate, there's some divergence there. So the question is, how do these differing priorities impact the global competitiveness of stablecoin issuers? And which approach better balances innovation with financial stability risks in your experience with being in the e-money business now for several years?
Well, I think those are crucial questions for us. And before coming here, I was more positive towards the Genius Act, actually, than I heard Benjamin Lenz talking yesterday, and it got me thinking. This is this is sort of tricky. The main problem I have is that, especially with MiCA, it's sort of put in place to kill Libra at the time, which is, for all the wrong reasons. But we were actually waiting for this unified regulatory framework to work within. And then it came out, and I think there are major flaws there that have to do with, especially in MiCA, the problem is, as I see it, there are problems related to the fact that if you're non-bank in this sector, you have to put reserves into banks. And then at the same time, banks may become stablecoin issuers. So you are forced to actually put your funds into your competitors' accounts. And we know that, with KYC and everything like that, you actually, when you get into a business relationship with a bank, you are giving them a lot of information about yourself. So I think that there's a competitive issue there. This is not fair competition. And I think this will stifle innovation in Europe. I'm almost sure of it. And that's one problem, and we can discuss this at length. The other thing is that both in MiCA and in the Genius Act, no yield. For me, it's like throwing a cocktail party without alcohol. Why? Why would you want to issue stablecoins in a regulatory environment like that? But still, I think, I still think that this also reflects some of the differences between the US and Europe. We are maybe far too careful in Europe, so to speak. And, I have I would say, the terrible experience of having experienced the financial meltdown of the Icelandic financial system in 2008. And I would be careful for people to draw the wrong lessons from that catastrophic effect. But again, I could talk about that for hours. But
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it's exactly what I was thinking. So I was thinking about 2008 is what is the underpinning of crypto, right? Which is too big to fail. We need to build something that's decentralized to get away from these systemic problems. And So I feel like you're starting to tread there. So maybe let's explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I almost get a twitch in my eye when I talk about this, because after the financial meltdown in 2008, I was actually made the chairman of the Financial Supervisory Authority in Iceland. The previous board had left, and there was no director. So it was really just, yeah, not a totally easy situation to be in. And the thing is that I think, contrary to many people, given that experience, I think that stable coins, if we have the right regulatory framework, will not increase financial instability. On the contrary, I think if we design it correctly, it can increase financial stability. And that comes back to the point I was making before, especially with MiCA, forcing non-banks to actually put the funds into banks, while at the same time they can be competitors. That's a dangerous cocktail. I'm not going to say that the banks, as I see it, you're feeding the gorillas. I'm not using the word dinosaurs because I still think that banks will have a huge role to play in all of this. And I don't think we should look at them as our enemies or something like that. I think that this is a financial system that is changing, and banks will play a crucial role. And why will they play a crucial role? Because you will need, at least given the current situation and in the foreseeable future, you will always need fiat currency. And why is that? The textbook example is you need money to, it's a medium of exchange, it's a measure of unit, and it's a store of value. But as long as you pay your taxes in your jurisdiction, in the local money, whatever it is, you will need that money. And it's a huge part of everything we spend. In my country, the VAT is 24%, so you always need fiat. And, I just think we have to be very careful, and we have to be very clear on how we see stable coins actually fitting into the current monetary system, and how that can actually increase financial stability rather than increase stability of the financial system rather than vice versa.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's really interesting. So maybe let's pivot to like another issue. So there's basically 2 or 3 delineable differences between the two regimes. Another aspect is consumer protection and adoption. So the Genius Act focuses on specific consumer protections like bankruptcy, prioritization, and AML KYC compliance. Whereas MiCA imposes broader requirements, including redemption rights and liability for service providers. So in your view, how do these differences affect consumer trust and the potential for widespread stablecoin adoption in the US versus the EU?
I would never say I was a specialist on that subject, but as I see it, and I may be wrong, sometimes I'm wrong, those are like two sides of the same coin. Whether you want to protect the consumers directly, or whether you want to go the other way around, to look at the bankruptcy laws, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it really matters in the end. What I think, and this is a point I made regularly in other forums, is that you just need regulatory clarity, not just regulatory clarity, but also, and this I know from bitter experience, you need a well-functioning judicial system where you can take disputes and where you can get court decisions, and it can't take too much time. Sadly, in my country, we are still having court cases from the 2008 crash. That's a long time. It's almost 20 years. That's not something we can live with. So actually, responding to your question, I think there's not a great difference there, But what is crucial is that the rules are clear, and people feel comfortable in working in that space, and they feel comfortable in using the products, which are the stable coins, et cetera, et cetera. That's the crucial point. And that makes me think of another thing, and that is, we're talking about the geopolitics of all this. We are so focused on the Genius Act and MiCA. The world is bigger. And we live in a globalized economy, and we are working on the internet. It's a global phenomenon. And I think that this may become, and this is something seriously, as a European, I'm concerned, because I'm thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my children, their grandchildren. And I sometimes think, are we willing here in Europe to become second-class citizens in the world, so to speak? Because I think the companies will move to the place on Earth which has the best regulatory system. And it's interesting because one of the things about one of the critical points about the Genius Act is saying, okay, you have this federal thing, and then you have the states, and blah blah blah, and the states can have different rules. If I was an American, I wouldn't be that concerned about that. You had the same with corporate law. That's why you have all those companies incorporated in Delaware. It's not because, never been to Delaware. Perhaps it's great, but I think there are tax reasons or something for that. So you can have competition within the U.S. between the different states, and I'm sure that stablecoin issuers will just move to the state that has the best framework. And don't get me wrong, when I say the best framework, I'm not talking about where you can do hideous things. I'm just saying where you have the best regulatory framework in all respects.
I think that's a great analogy. If you look at competition just in the U.S., for a good jurisdiction just to do like legacy business, why does Delaware have all the companies? There's a bunch of reasons. They outnumber everybody else because it's the best environment. And that's a lesson that can be applied probably to many activities, including, where stablecoins are going to end up. Great. There's a few minutes left here. I've got one more question, which we've already touched on some of it, which is just the regulatory fragmentation versus harmonization. So we've kind of touched on that a little bit. Maybe just probe a little more. So the Genius Act allows for a dual federal state regulatory model, potentially creating inconsistencies across the U.S., i.e. the Delaware model, while MiCA enforces a single EU-wide framework with extraterritorial reach. So that's kind of interesting. It's geocentric or geonormative, boom, but it has some type of extraterritorial reach. What are the practical implications of these approaches for stablecoin issuers operating globally, especially regarding compliance costs and market access? Do you have any thoughts on that, or we can go somewhere for the next 2 minutes?
Yeah, I have thoughts on everything, not very constructed ones.
Nice.
Of course, it's nice with MiCA, and this is the whole idea behind the European Union as such, that you have a unified system, so to speak, and you can operate everywhere. And that's how we in Monerium, actually, even though we're based in Iceland at the moment, we can passport our license to every country in Europe, and we do. Of course, having a system like MiCA is proposing, the main problem I see is this tendency, and we had a discussion here yesterday from Charles from the European Central Bank. It's sort of like building the new system on the old system. Well, I think we should rethink the whole system. And as I see it, I'm not convinced that we're going away from fractional banking. I mean, it's just so effective as an economist. It's just so effective in capitalizing value in the economy. We're not going to go away from that. And I think that we just have to keep in mind how money is created in the old system, you know. And I think that the stablecoins are just new technology. And I firmly believe we usually solve technical problems with technology. We find technical solutions to technical problems. So that is why I'm so, turning back to your question, that's why I'm so a little bit concerned about Europe. Of course, I'm concerned about everything, but, you know, putting this constraint on the issuers, keeping reserves in their competitors' accounts, simply doesn't work. And I think we should much more be talking about, I mean, how can these different type of companies work together rather than setting them up as competitors. Well, we are competitors, of course, but still. And I think that, as I said before, I think it's wrong. And if we had more time, we could discuss that. I'm sure that stable coins can actually increase financial stability rather than erode it.
Yeah, so definitely there could be, so there's a little bit of the answers to yesterday's problems aren't the answers to today's technical problems. And yeah, so we're out of time. So, I mean, that was great. Does anybody maybe have time for like one question? Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Gunnar? Okay, won't embarrass him. That just means it was amazing. So, hey, my name's Eric. I'm giving keynote later. Come see me. I'll tell you why nobody wants your stablecoin. And don't miss it at 3:00. And I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. And let's just have a round of applause for Gunnar here. Thanks a lot.